Oh, somebody's asking, right? I just saw somebody was asking which topic this room is. We're talking about community engagement for sustainable development. We're just waiting for Alex to come back in the room before we start.
Sorry about that, folks. I think we're all organized here now, and
okay.
The floor is yours.
Okay, thanks very much, Alex. Well, I want to welcome all the participants here today, whether you're giving a presentation, whether you're part of the panel, or you're here because you're interested in the conversation and you've got ideas to offer when we get to the discussion at the end. You're all very, very welcome. My name's Julie Ward. I'm co-chair of Urban Economy Forum 2020, and I've been involved with this group getting on for 10 months now, since the forum in Toronto last October. And I used to be a member of the European Parliament until Brexit happened, which is frankly a disaster for my country. But before I was a politician, I worked as a community activist. I worked in engagement using arts and culture as a tool for social change. And so I'm moderating this session, and really this is my favorite subject, I suppose. And I was participating a little bit in the previous, one of the previous breakout sessions, and somebody was, and towards the end of the session, people began to talk about participation and community engagement. Of course, that's our subject. And there was a bit of a discussion about, does it need to come from the top or does it need to come from the bottom? And it is my experience, both as a community activist and as a politician, that the real change comes when it's pushed from bottom up. And that is largely because politicians and decision makers don't lead. They need to be led, they need to be pushed, they need to be provoked, they need to be prodded. They need kind of, they need mass, in fact. They need to sense something within the community, a hunger or a thirst for change, for doing something differently. So it's really brilliant that we're talking about this today. I wanted us to think a little bit about community. What is community? Who's in that community? And when community engagement is happening, is the community that's being engaged inclusive? Is it representative of the diversity in a community? Or are the people who are being asked to participate in engagement just the usual suspects? Because it's very easy for some authorities to look like they're doing community engagement when they're not necessarily doing community engagement. So I want us to talk about that widest possible group. How can we be really, really inclusive in terms of indigenous people, in terms of migrant populations, mobile populations, people who might be passing through, not necessarily staying in that community, as well as the more settled traditional communities who are often also very forgotten about, particularly in rural areas. And when we're talking about engagement, it would be really good to talk about quality engagement, because lots of decision makers have realized that they need to do community engagement. But it's the quality of that engagement that really, really matters. In the processes of engagement, is it an open-ended process, or is it just yes/no questions? Is it just a one-time kind of tick box piece of engagement, or is it about building relationships? Is it about a stepped process? Is it about coming back to the participatory groups again and again to check in with them and help grow that community of participation? And if barriers exist, and they generally do, is the authority that's involved in the engagement willing to remove those barriers? And they can be many. So, for example, I remember where I'm I'm calling in from the north of England, and I remember once my local authority decided that participatory budgeting was a very good idea, and I agree with it. It's a great idea. It's a model that comes from Brazil, in fact. But they held a participatory budgeting exercise on a very, very snowy day in February, when in fact people with disabilities couldn't come because the surfaces of the roads were very icy, and they held it in a building that was not accessible. So we have to be really aware of all the barriers that exist and try and remove those. And I would also say that there are economic barriers for participation as well. So if you're a single mum and you want to participate, and you might need childcare, you might need somebody, you might need a creche to be put on. So I want us to think about all those things. And community engagement needs to be, it needs to be fun, it needs to be interactive, it needs to be memorable. And finally, just to talk about sustainable development. So we're talking, this is about towns, not cities, or it's about small cities and towns. And obviously we want to benefit the townspeople from the policies and the decisions that are being made, but also sustainable development has to be for everybody in the wider world. So when seas are rising and there are changes in weather patterns, those things are going to come and bite us all. In the north of England in December in 2015, when there was snow on top of the mountains, we had a subtropical storm. And that means climate change came to visit those people. And they became climate refugees, just like many of the people in parts of the Sahel in Africa. So it has to be sustainable development for everybody. And that means human rights, it means ethical supply chains, it means addressing poverty and inequality, access to decent services, work-life balance, dignity in work, workers' rights, a whole raft of different things that I hope we're going to talk about today. Right, I'm going to move to the first panel member. I think we're almost on time. And I'm going to ask Michael Pryor to speak. Michael and I have been working together with Culture Declares Emergency, which is a fantastic campaign in the UK that gets arts and cultural organisations to be at the forefront of recognising the climate emergency. He's a climate and ecological emergency practitioner and change management expert. He grew up in a Lancashire town mill, which is where Councillor Matthew Brown is from, who was speaking earlier. Studied English at Lancaster University. He has worked in both the public and the private sector, but he retired recently to devote more time to personal and community action in response to the climate and the ecological emergency, establishing in his hometown of Huddersfield the first local network of arts and culture organisations in the global declaration movement Culture Declares Emergency. And I'm so pleased that he's here, because change is happening in these small towns, not in the big cities like London. So Michael, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Do I have some slides there, please?
For sure.
Thank you very much. Thanks, Alex. Thank you. So thanks very much for inviting me to share our experience. And I'm very pleased to say that for the next few minutes, it will be about bottom-up community engagement. Culture Declares Emergency. If you could take the next slide, please. Thank you. Culture Declares Emergency, as Julie said, is a growing global movement of organisations and individuals in the arts and culture sector. Our mission sees this sector as a leading contributor in creating a regenerative future that sustains everyone, everywhere. The movement launched in April 2019 with a call out to the public to write a letter to the earth. in response to the climate and ecological emergency. Next slide, please. Here in the town of Huddersfield, at the local Ukrainian club, we hosted a public reading of selected letters to the earth, providing space and time for contemplation and conversation of the earth crisis. On the left-hand side of this slide is a list of venues which hosted reading events, and as you can see, Ontario was also represented. On the right is the book published last November with selected letters, and the proceeds from this book go entirely towards campaigning for environmental justice. Next slide, please. These photographs give a flavour of our event at the Ukrainian Club. Our readers and audience were mixed in terms of age, gender, ethnicity, socioeconomic background, and as you can see, we arranged the room in a way to facilitate discussion in small groups. As the evening progressed, everyone was encouraged to write down their thoughts and feelings, and you can see one of those post-it cards in the middle of the screen there where someone has drawn some bees and written their thoughts and feelings. Next slide, please. Thanks, Alex. Last summer, I used the momentum from our launch event to write to every arts and cultural organisation I could find in the borough of Kirklees. By September, we'd established the first local network in the global movement, Culture Declares Emergency. Kirklees is part of West Yorkshire, essentially a borough of towns and villages covering some 400 square kilometres in the South Pennine Hills. Huddersfield being the biggest town with a population of just under 450,000. Next slide, please, Alex, thank you. This slide shows the umbrella declaration and the geographical distribution of our local network. You'll notice that there's a broad mix, including theatres, festivals, museums, libraries, and faith groups. The green shapes represent our declarer organisations in our local network. Next slide, please. We encourage action following declaration, so action, not just words. Without action, there are only good intentions. Soon after making their declaration, Holmfirth Film Festival curated a series of environmental films, badged with our network logo. They hosted a post-screening discussion on the climate emergency. Next slide, please. Our biggest action to date by far was the pop-up Climate Emergency Hub. Kirklees Council provides local empty shop spaces surrounding Huddersfield Public Library to arts and cultural organisations free of charge. Over 6 days in March, we hosted 28 public events and provided space for many displays and installations in this one shop. We ran workshops, lectures, discussion groups, a sustainable fashion day, and poetry readings, amongst other things. An important partnership was with staff and students at the University of Huddersfield. Next slide, please. Thank you. These photographs give you a sense of our pop-up space. The post-it notes wall chart from Climate Museum UK, top right, gave visitors the means to share their feelings about the state of the planet throughout the week. And we had lots of good discussions throughout the week. Next slide, please. I wanted to share with you some detail of one of the standing installations. Kirklees Council's Museums and Galleries team adapted their educational Museum in a Box, normally curated for schools, to stimulate conversation on this emergency. Members of the public were encouraged to handle the artifacts and talk to museum experts and each other about them. Next slide, please. And finally, today's summit sessions coincide fortuitously with our movement's call out to the public to read their Letters to Power. This is a follow-up to the Letters to the Earth event. In the last 5 minutes, we've come full circle from our Letters to the Earth launch, And as a captive audience of people in many positions of power across the world, I'm afraid I couldn't resist the temptation to share with you my own short poem. It also links back to this morning's opening ceremony, where I was honoured to hear James Carpenter speak so movingly about 7 generations awareness. I hope you'll read it later, and in the meantime, thank you for listening.
Thank you. That's absolutely great, Mike. I haven't yet written my letter to power. I've been very busy planning this, but I will be writing my letter to power. I'm going to call on Lynn Napier to speak next. Lynn is President of Northwest Territories Association of Communities and Mayor of Fort Smith. She's a board member of the Fort Smith Metis Council. She's a dedicated community member focused on improving accessibility to services and programs, and which is great to hear, because accessibility is such a big issue if we're going to have proper community engagement. So Lynn, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Julie. And thank you so much for the opportunity to present to all of you regarding community engagement for sustainable development. The Northwest Territories is the traditional territory and home of the Inuvialuit, the Gwich'in, the Sahtu Dene, the Métis, the Dehcho people, the Tlicho, and the Akecho. The Northwest Territories Association of Communities proudly represent all 33 communities of the Northwest Territories, which vary in size from 52 people to 21,000. The community for which I'm the mayor has a population of just over 2,500, and I live in the traditional territory of the Salt River First Nation, the Northwest Territory Métis Nation, and the Smiths Landing First Nation, and I'm a member of the Northwest Territory Métis Nation. Like many communities across Canada, our major issues include access to safe and affordable housing, healthcare, education, and employment. And we've been fortunate that we've been able to build upon our previous successes and planning through community engagement that have supported us and our partners in accessing funding even during COVID. In 2018, the town of Fort Smith completed our community consultation and released our strategic plan. The community engagement process took place over a 12-month period, during which residents participated and identified opportunities for Fort Smith's future. The process included opportunities such as information booths at the college, youth visioning workshops, a World Cafe, and different workshops with our advisory boards. From our community engagement, our strategic plan was built. Our vision is to work with our partners to enhance our excellent quality of life by respecting values, traditions, and healthy lifestyles, and to continue to advance as a unified, active, and prosperous community. Our values define how we operate and are fundamentally important to us in how we work with each other and represents the citizens of our community. We're welcoming, innovative, sustainable by committing to sustainability in our town's operations and development, unified, working with Indigenous governments and our partners to implement our plans and achieve our goals. We have a working group with that consists of myself and the 3 Indigenous leaders in our community. We are also committed to operating professionally and to the highest ethical standards. Key themes and priorities emerged through the community's engagement process in 2 sections. The first included priorities within the town's mandate to address youth, partnerships with Indigenous governments and others, infrastructure, community services, and communication. The second include priorities that the town can work with other governments and agencies to achieve, and which we see ourselves as facilitators, such as sustainability, energy and climate change, education, economy, and affordable housing. It was clear through our process that our residents saw us as being responsible for a lot more than we are under a municipality, but we felt that those issues were important to address as community leaders. Based on the priorities, some of our goals included being a leader in sustainability. Some of our strategies included supporting the development of affordable housing within the town and working with Indigenous governments to support their development plans. In our priority to be a leader in sustainability, we identified some of our previous accomplishments the contributions of our advisory boards, our waste management strategy, and moving our town facilities into electric and away from diesel. Our future strategies included being the first carbon neutral community in the Northwest Territories and reducing waste. Community engagement has served our community very well and has allowed us and continues to allow us to grow and to be sustainable. Our Sustainable Development Advisory Board has been instrumental in the creation of our waste management plan, which will bring our landfill from a lifespan of 25 years to that of over 100. The plan helps us in our decisions as council for capital spending and O&M. And the waste management plan itself was brought to the Sustainable Development Board through another community engagement session in which we were building our integrated community sustainability plan. Our Sustainable Development Advisory Board also authored a document on affordable and accessible housing in our community. This document helped us in working with Salt River First Nation, which has reserve lands within our community boundaries. The Indigenous government looked for our support in their housing project, and we were able to bring our recommendations forward with our support for the First Nation. This helped them in their recently announced successful application for over $16 million for housing. Community engagement is imperative to our success and our growth as a community. What we have found of importance and recommend to others is the need to empower the citizens in their engagement. Residents and community partners need to see that there's real feedback and real recommendations that results in real change. Community members need to be the drivers. Ultimately, empower your champions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That was really inspiring. We're going to move straight to the next speaker, who I had the privilege to work with directly when I was in Toronto last year, Jose Echeverri, who's a member of the Board of Governors of York University. He works on policies and programs to facilitate women and youth leadership in sustainable town development. His work is both local and international, focused on addressing climate change. He's also the director of the Renewable Energy Academy and has received numerous awards. And Jose, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. That's a very kind introduction. I really appreciate it. And just by show of hands, can people give me thumbs up if they hear me okay? Thank you so much. I appreciate that. I'm in a little casita that was built for this type of activities, and the signal is comme ci, comme ça. So I'm gonna start by explaining very briefly in the 5 minutes I have what I wanna say. So what I want to say is to contextualize the current crisis, the pandemic crisis, within the pivoting that needs to occur society-wise. And I'm gonna give a few examples. So I'm gonna start by showing you a little video, and I hope this works. Bear with me, I'm actually going to do it in this way. This is about our climate solutions park that we're building in the university. So I hope this works.
You don't have to have a PhD or be a scientist. Climate solutions exist. Housing, affordable. Food, grow it. Energy, make it clean. Education, learn by doing it yourself. Technology, build it. Ride, charge it. Art, love it. Where? Climate Solutions Park. Where you come, learn, enjoy, take it home, pass it on.
Okay, I hope you could see that. And basically, what that is intended to do is to showcase the effectiveness of these meetings. The people that made that video are my colleagues from Arts Help. And we both, our organizations met during the previous meetings that Julie was alluding to. And we've continued to collaborate ever since. And now with the pandemic, we have pivoted into the digital realm. So that's one aspect that I wanted to mention. There's of course a lot of considerations about the digital divide, but at the point that I'm trying to make at this moment is the necessity to creating new online resources that are actually targeted to the needs of people. The video was 30 seconds, and I'm very curious to hear if you liked it or not. So that's one example of pivoting. The other one that I wanted to give is ourselves in the Climate Solutions Park at York University are learning from initiatives that are being implemented elsewhere, particularly in our own backyard. And I want to very briefly mention one that I think I selected because it's providing examples on how to proceed with the Climate Solutions Park. And this is called the York University Entrepreneurial Leadership and Learning Alliance Program for Women Business Owners. Whew, that was a big one. And in short, we call it ELA. And ELA got created, I'll show you the website. It looks like this. And it's an accelerator for women entrepreneurs. I sent these links to the team, so hopefully we'll be able to circulate them. But very briefly, I want to tell you how ELA has grown from an idea to something that we're drawing inspiration on a pandemic and post-pandemic world. First of all, the inspiration comes to target specific groups that need to be focused on. I could have given you an example on Black Lives Matter or First Nation reconciliation. There are two North American very important topics right now. But I chose ELA because it's one that has to do with the revitalization of the local economy. And basically, very long story short, since I have only 1 minute left, how did ELA become a reality? Well, it became a reality because people inside of the university recognized the need to create an accelerator to help women entrepreneurs, which are the local basis for prosperity. But how did it get funded was at the very top of the food chain. And this, I end on this comment because Julie was asking, is it top down or bottom up? And I think it's both. Basically, our Prime Minister, Justin Trudeau, when he got elected, decided that he wanted to embrace gender parity and women's rights, First Nations rights. But specifically here, that got translated into trenches of funding of the federal government. And one of the ministers for small business development, Mary Ng, has actually funded this accelerator. But here you have the example of how a top-down idea met with a bottom-up swell of support. And now we have a group of women entrepreneurs that are the basis of the local economy, being able to access new services to become profitable. And I'm gonna leave it at that, but I'm open for questions or comments that folks may have. I think that is 5 minutes on the dot.
Okay, thank you very much, Jose. We're going to move straight to Maggie Filipova Rivers, who is here representing City of Sanctuary. City of Sanctuary is a UK-wide movement, not just happening in cities, but happening in small towns also. And it was set up to respond to the refugee crisis. I'm sure she'll tell us a lot more. But Maggie was born in Bulgaria. She moved to the UK 20 years ago to study economics at Newcastle University, which is where I studied, Maggie. Later did an MSc in political economy and development at SOAS in London. And over the last 6 years, she's been working in refugee entrepreneurship and refugee rights. And she's a regional coordinator for the City of Sanctuary and manages Reading City of Sanctuary. Reading is a middle-sized city to the west of London. She's also It's a town, it's not a city yet. Yeah. She's also deputy leader of South Oxfordshire District Council with a portfolio for community services. And I know that she was at a council meeting before she came here. So this shows you how hard, and she's got children, she's a mum, okay? So ask a busy person and you'll get something done. So Maggie, the floor is yours.
Thank you. I'm just going to try and share my screen. I think I can do that, which is great. Oh, can I? Yes, share, and here we go. Right. So thank you so much for having me, Julian, for really pushing me to be here. Essentially, as Julie said, I work in refugee rights, and also I am a counsellor myself. So it's that kind of dual hats those two hats that I wear that really make it very interesting for me to be here and to tell you a little bit about how we can apply the City of Sanctuary model to building towns and cities that are inclusive to all, but specifically that pay attention to the needs of people who are fleeing war and persecution. And I think the challenge here is that we have, certainly in the UK, on the one hand, negative public perception of those that are sanctuary seekers, and on the other hand we have, as a result of that, lack of political will to protect people. So how do we deal with that? How do we build a movement to welcome refugees and asylum seekers? Well, one of the answers is in this really busy slide, and it's to do with our theory of change. So over here you can see we work on two levels. We work on a micro level and on a macro level. The work of our groups, such as the Reading group, is grounded in social contact theory. Social contact theory says that when we create opportunities for relationships, of solidarity to form, essentially we can minimize prejudice and inspire compassion between people from diverse backgrounds. So our local groups, or our local branches within towns and cities, have steering groups that very much engage in two broad types of activities or categories of activities. Welcoming activities, those are things like befriending, like knitting groups, like drop-in centres where host communities can meet with refugee communities and interact and learn about one another. And the second group is this streams of sanctuary. The streams really refers to what we call engagement with the mainstream. And I will talk a little bit about that in a minute. On the macro level, then, people that are mobilized through this local networks, through these local activities, we then channel them to join us in nationwide campaigns. Here in the UK, we have Lift a Ban campaign, end of indefinite detention, etc. So we really sensitize people locally, and then we kind of channel them through to more wider campaigning. So in summary, the way that we enact change is through this contact theory, through building relationships of solidarity, engaging the mainstream through these awards, and I'll talk about them a little bit more, turning empathy into action, and mobilizing our network behind these advocacy initiatives, and through the practical application of our values and network principles. So how do we work with the mainstream? So this is essentially bodies and mainstream agencies that we engage with. So these are local authorities, so theatres, health providers, gardens, schools, universities, libraries. You will see that many of those actually are provided by local authorities. So I guess when you kind of get a local authority to be on board to apply for a sanctuary award, then that can kind of filter down to schools and libraries and museums. So we work with the mainstream. Essentially, we say, hey, mainstream, would you like to be a place of sanctuary? And they normally say, yes, what do we have to do about this? And we say, well, you have to do three things. You have to learn, embed, and share. And after that, we will give you your sanctuary award. Learning is very much about engaging truly and honestly in learning opportunities where you can understand, where staff can understand what are the challenges that sanctuary seekers face. Embed is very much about adapting, changing your policies, your processes, your procedures in order to ensure that what you're providing, the services that you're providing, are inclusive to this particular group. And sharing is very much about recognizing and celebrating and sharing good practices. And really, this last part, the sharing part, is the counter narrative to what we, to this kind of very negative media narrative that exists out there, and that, you know, many of us in developed, economies are quite familiar with, those that dehumanize refugees and asylum seekers. So that's how we do it. And so usually then one of these mainstream organizations will in an application for a sanctuary award, and we as an organization will walk them through it, and through those they commit, and we review their strategies, their sanctuary strategies, on usually every 3 years, to hold them to account, to hold local authorities to account for the commitment that they have made, usually through passing a motion at council. So what we do as well is we produce these resource packs, and they're widely available. So if anybody's interested in these models and how you can get your local authorities to really engage with this process, you're very welcome to have a look at them. They're on our website. And here you can see the resource packs for universities and for gardens and some others as well. And I just want to finish off by giving you just a few examples of what this embedding could look like. So for example, here in Reading, we had our central library, which of course is part of our local authority. We asked them to remove the requirement for membership of permanent residents, so i.e. to have a stable home, because many sanctuary seekers do not. And they did, and therefore now asylum seekers are able to have library membership and to be able to access services provided in the library. Another example is allotments. Again, they are usually managed by local authorities, have been made widely available to asylum seekers who normally wouldn't be able to access them, so that they can produce and supplement their very small weekly allowance that they have, to supplement their diets and to ensure that they are able to help in that way. Universities, for example, that have become universities of sanctuary, usually provide scholarships to sanctuary seekers, and so that both asylum seekers and refugees are able to study and better themselves as well. So these are just a few examples of what you can achieve, and through becoming a place at sanctuary, we ensure that there is access to a lot that is out there in the UK. We have 115 local groups, and these include towns, villages, boroughs, etc. And as part of our network, we communicate often, and we seek to build capacity within all of our network members. So I'll leave it there, because I'm sure I'm over my 5 minutes, but this is our website. Do have a look, and do email me if you have any questions and if you would like to know a little bit more.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you so much for being on the call and sharing that. I love Cities of Sanctuary, and when I was a member of the European Parliament, I was very active with my Northwest cities, so it's great to hear about what's been happening in Reading. We're going to move to panel now, and we've got some great panelists, and they have been sent some prior questions, and this panel discussion is going to be about how we about policies and programs to facilitate women and youth leadership in sustainable town development. So I'm not going to read the questions out because the panelists were given them beforehand. I'd just like to go to the first panelist, who is Albert Nashon, who's a youth leader from Kenya. He's a speaker, a trainer, entrepreneur, and founding director of the Slum Code Group, which he set up 14 years ago. And he's built sustainable development strategies for low-income communities through resources mapping. So, Albert, the floor is yours. You had some questions that we asked you to respond to. Thank you. Have we got Albert? Is he with us? Shall I go to the next speaker?
Yes, hello.
Oh, you're there. Great. Albert, the floor is yours. Yeah. Albert?
Yes.
Yeah. Could you just
You
address...
can hear me well?
Yeah. If you've got about 5 minutes to address some of the questions we sent you.
All right. Thank you so much. I really appreciate for the moments to be part of this. And let me just remove that. Yeah, so what I was saying is that my name is Albert Nashon, and I'm very, very pleased to be able to join us with you. Thank you for the introduction and for the amazing panelists and the discussions that have been going on. Indeed, I am the founder of an organization called the Slum Code Group, which is based in Nairobi, Kenya. And I did this starting when I was a very young person back in the year 2006. And I've grown with a lot of young people who are now capable leaders because of the community involvement and engagement that we've been able to pick up with them over the years. And so one thing that I know moving forward, even to be able to respond to many of the questions that are there. I will talk much more about youth, definitely not a lot about women, but I know that in the whole scheme of things, then there is a level of participation that we actually have to be part of. So I know that some young people asked me one question as I was just growing up, and one thing, running the Slum Code Group, and one thing that they said is that, how are we able to achieve the sustainable development goals as a global action, yet we have so much inequalities and disparities moving forward within the global space, you know? And so the idea of thinking global and acting local became a very perfect solution to some of these challenges, whereby what role are you able to play as a young person into building up into the largest picture of the goals, because everybody has to act locally, yet we collaborate and we get to capture the global sphere of how things happen. So the questions that were asked ideally had related with policies related to women and youth. Like the first question would be an example of policies that work. I know definitely we have UN programs, we have the Africa Union programs, we have a lot of things that are related to youth, but I will want to zero in to like our Kenyan space, where we've been able to have what we call the Kenyan youth development policy. And so the youth development policy, which has been in the running over the last few years, was just recently launched by the cabinet secretary. We call them cabinet secretaries here. Maybe you call them ministers elsewhere, but that is who they are. They represent a certain ministry. So our ministry for the youth falls within Ministry of ICT, Innovation and Youth Affairs. And so that already is a systemic approach within the government setup that enables our young people to be anchored within a certain policy framework. And I know that that is one thing that to us is really a big success, because one challenge that we have is Kenya and many developing countries have had their development patterns anchored within 5 years, because our presidential, our general election systems are all based within a 5-year plan. And normally when one president comes in after another, things do not continue to flow. Everybody comes in with a different agenda, with a different team, with a different passion to do certain things. And I think that in a big way has been our major undoing. So as relates matters youth involvement and women involvement, that has become even a bigger challenge because of, number one, the issue of gender mainstreaming and affirmative action. Those have not been things that have really been factored in very well, because Africa in itself is a young population, I mean based on young people, because the population of close to 1.3 billion, we are looking at about 68% being people who are below 75. And actually the whole median age for young people in Africa is between 19 and 20. So you can see how young people are. But unfortunately, the young people who are supposed to be the youth bulge that builds onto a very innovative platform, leveraging on what we would call the fourth industrial revolution, coming in with the technology, coming in with advancement of communication, coming in with the issues of beating geographical barriers because of time. Access still remains one big challenge. Internet still is not as widespread the way it is supposed to be, though in the cities, this does happen and many people begin to enjoy the facility. So we are looking at it from the perspective whereby us as Slum Code, where have we come in to be able to create what we call this easily accessible safe spaces that are targeting kids and talented young aspiring entrepreneurs? Because these are people who go to school, and we have a school system which is very, very different from a learning system. And many people in the space are more focused on education, that you need to get papers for you to achieve certain things, which is a very key factor. But again, our education system has changed over the time. We've actually changed it about, this is going to be the fourth time, from the earlier education system which we had, which was a CPE, Certificate of Primary Education, with the 7 years and the 3 years and the 4 years. Now we moved on to one for 844. In the primary settings. Now we are moving into a new one, which is 6-4-3-2, So the different sort of systems that have been changed over time, again, like I said, are anchored onto this. But all this have seen to it that our system of growth, how our young people have been involved in systemic changes, in policies, in programs that impact on them, has had a lot of challenges coming forward. But that is not all. The good news is that in Kenya particularly, we have a group of young people, because about 14 million live within the urban setup. And you're going to find that the urban setup has exposed a lot of young people to different opportunities, particularly having the United Nations Environmental Program headquartered in our own city in Nairobi. That means that many programs that are run by the UN, young people can have the opportunity to become part of. And that is what even as Slum Code we've been able to do, whereby what we can be part of, we become part of. But you realize that there is still a very big gap in terms of the connection between youth and women engagement in policy, engagement in program development, even engagement in politics. This has just begun to change because we've brought aspect of affirmative action, like I mentioned earlier, whereby women have begun getting elected into the National Assembly, into the Senate. Hopefully one day we are going to have a woman president. You just never know.
So I think, Albert,
specific government position. This is the direction that we are going. So I want to really appreciate for this platform and for the opportunity for us to be able to build up on.
Okay, I think I'm going to take over from there. The connection's not too good, but great to hear all that. I have to say that I have some history of working in Kenya. I did some election observation work in Kenya a few years ago, and in fact spoke at conferences to encourage women and youth to participate in political and democratic processes. We're going to move now to Chisom Udeze, who's a founder and lead strategist of Metal Consult. She's an entrepreneur and mother-to-be. She's an economist and founder and lead strategist of Metal Consult, which promotes grassroots campaigns to enhance models of economic development projects for the benefit of Femme Vert, which I think means turtle tree. So Chisom, the floor is yours.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for having me. My name is Chisom, and I am actually a mom already. I have a 9.5-month-old little girl. But like I said, thanks for having me. I want to talk today about programs to facilitate women leadership in sustainable development. I am currently based in Norway, and I run an organization called Diversify. Diversify is an organization that works to provide professional inclusion and access to skilled immigrants and repats, so Norwegians who've lived abroad and coming back to Norway. On the side of that, I also founded a co-working community for women and mothers that promotes inclusion and diversity in practice by providing safe spaces where they work. Now, in the years I've been working both on my organization and now my company, you know, we've traveled around the country in Norway talking to people, both immigrants alike. So we have skilled immigrants, we have refugees, we have asylum seekers, as well as women and mothers who are professionals are looking to work. And we find that even though we live in a country like Norway that is arguably one of the, you know, most developed countries in the world, there are still roadblocks with regards to access for women and youths, and also that is worsened on the basis of, say, your immigrant status, or, you know, how you fit into the country or the communities. So in thinking about the programs and policies that will facilitate women leadership in sustainable development, I think looking at ways to promote female entrepreneurship as well as self-employment, because this you find not just in Europe, but also in Africa. And I do work a lot in Africa, where you see, because of the lack of employment opportunities, oftentimes women and youths gravitate towards establishing their own companies. And in Norway, this is one of the things we're pushing with the government, where we say, so it's a small country, it's a competitive market, and there are not a lot of opportunities available for people. And it's, you know, really difficult for people who are immigrants, who are not Norwegian natives, to fit into the society. So what we could do is enable them by providing them resources and the skills they need to build and develop their own businesses. Now, what this means is providing access not just to traditional education, but also informal education, down to how to start your own business, how to make business plans, accounting, things that you don't necessarily learn in school depending on what you studied. I think there's also a need to include gender equality in access to funds, because one of the block roads people have is, not even though they have great business ideas that are innovative and can contribute to sustainable cities, they don't have access to the funds and the resources they need to develop, you know, the concepts that they have. I think there's also a need to encourage women to enter into non-traditional professions. So we look at green and innovation sector, and also in the tech space, because even though the startup space is growing, you can, in many cases, it's still dominated by men. And where there are women, they're oftentimes in service sectors. There's also a need to have gender balance in decision-making and leadership. But I think ultimately, one of the work that I think is important for governments, or for all stakeholders, both across public and private sector, is trying to understand what diversity and inclusion means, because this is the best way to integrate everyone across society's sectors. So diversity, I like to think of it as coming down to a science. You know, we know you have different people, say a woman, a man, a Black person, a brown person, an Asian. We have all this that represents the society that we live in. But when we look at inclusion, how do you actually make them feel? How do you include them in the processes of developing, you know, not only themselves, but the cities they live in, as well as the countries that they live in? So one of when we work on projects, I think an important question to ask is everyone in the room? Because if everyone is in the room, then we can have more policies that are inclusive and takes account of things that we might ignore because we do not live in those experiences. We do not wear those shoes. So yeah, I think for me, that was more or less what I wanted to contribute to this, just an emphasis on quality engagement, which involves everyone. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. We're going to move now to hear from Elisa Sitchoff and Nina de Groot. And Elise is a methodology developer and publisher of Child Press, International Child Press Centre. She's also a member for Eurochild and the International Step by Step Association. And Nina de Groot is the child editor for Child Press. I've been very privileged to work very closely with International Child Press Centre during my parliamentary mandate, but continuing these fantastic relationships now in civil society. So Elise and Nina, are you there?
Yes, I am. Hi, Julie. Thank you.
Hi.
Hi. Is Elisa there as well?
Haven't seen her. I think you just is she
Okay.
is she on the call? She should be on the call.
Yes, I'm here. Yes,
All
I'm
right.
here.
Okay, well, you take it away, both of you, okay?
Yeah, I'm very happy to lead, to ask Nina to lead.
Yeah, okay.
Thank you. Thank you, Julie, for having me tonight, and thank you to all the speakers that went before us. I'm very happy to be here, and I'm very happy to be participating. So thank you for that. Well, we believe that it would be impossible to talk about an urgently needed new urban agenda while the children in the cities are themselves currently absent from the discussion we're having. We believe it's their right to be informed and thus to know and to participate in these activities. They have the right to be heard, as is written in Article 12 and 13 of the UN Convention of the Right of the Child. We are greatly positive about this conference today taking place and tomorrow, as the dialogue about sustainable development at town scale is a topic of everyday importance. And I would like to take every one of you with us in the dialogues that we see happening every day in the work that we do globally. At Child Press, young reporters use constructive journalism to make magazines about important questions and key issues. The content of these magazines form base for our advice to every mayor of every town. Our press centers are like airports. They act like interactive agencies, only with news instead of airplanes. It makes us happy to find mayors, presidents, and other important people that are actively working towards a better future for all children. It is our way of starting a dialogue within a reporter's neighborhood so that they can take these conversations to their own town halls, parliament, and to a global level on platforms such as the one hosted today at Habitat in Towns Collingwood World Summit. It is on all these levels where we want conversations about important issues like education and climate change to take place within and between generations. Our hopefully shared goal is to positively change statistics all around the world. Child Press is an organization that has such intergenerational solidarity as its functional base. Our youngest reporters are supported by young adults, and the young publishers are backed by those with a lifetime of experience in media and education. Several town facilities and the urban space in general form the basis for this solidarity. When schools, libraries, and community centers open their doors to children, we always see something magical happen. The highlighting of solutions on different levels in the method we use is empowering to the children once they get a hold of the microphone. And when they dare to ask questions, their environment becomes their school. They map their journey in their own magazines, and thus their journey can be followed by any other person, child and adult alike. We believe this empowerment is an absolute must for reaching the objective of an inclusive, safe, resilient, and sustainable town. A space that fits the one doesn't imperatively fit the other. There is a great diversity in needs between and within age groups. Decisions are taken in towns for many, and their implications are different for all. These brave children need to have adults become brave as well, so that they can both listen to and learn from each other. We are mostly just looking for adults that are capable of setting a good example. The moment a question is asked to a decision maker is the start of a new and vibrant and exciting dialogue. And we want to take this opportunity here today to make sure that youth are involved in the Town Leaders Global Network. So we urge you and everyone to allow them to follow the developments that happen locally and globally, so that we can together create a global learning environment in which people's talents lie at the heart of the conversation. The absolute leading question is who does what for children? It is their right to be heard and to know on which door to knock. So we urge you, don't wait for a child to come knocking on your door, but instead be sure to leave it open and invite them in. That is the kind of inclusive and welcoming community we want to see created all around the world. Thank you. I would like to give the rest of my speaking time to Elisa for additional comments. Elisa, you're still muted, I believe.
Maybe you have some questions, and maybe Nina can show some examples of the magazines and dictionaries which children have been making, the child press reporters.
Perhaps really that would be something that we could show, that we could put in the group chat afterwards for people to see. Is that a good idea?
Okay.
Yeah. Can I just interject? I think that's probably a good idea. If you put it in the group chat, I'm pretty sure that we'll be circulating information about this session anyway. I know I'm just watching time a bit because we did want to leave some time for questions for everybody. So if you don't mind, we're probably going to move to Douglas now. I just want to say, yeah, I just want to say how how amazing it is that you did the speaking, not Elise, and that is just that. I know that is how child press works. Okay, that children take a lead, children and young people are leading, and it's very, very inspirational. Okay, yeah. Especially as you came late to the
yes, I heard about it today, but I'm very glad to be here. Thank you so much.
Okay, so we're going to move now to Douglas Ragan, who's a Programme Management Officer at UN Habitat. He's our last speaker, and then we'll have a little bit of time for Q&A. Okay, Douglas, I hope you're there. The floor is yours.
Hi, Julie. I'm not sure if Douglas is in the room. I have reached out to him, though.
Okay. All right. Well, we shouldn't waste time. We've had some absolutely fantastic speakers, presenters at the beginning, but also speakers specifically looking at women and youth. So it'd be good now if there are some people who've got questions. Sorry, I'm not looking at the raised hand facility, maybe Alex is, but if there are people who would like to ask some questions, now's your chance, or to make some comments or add some other insights which we've missed or not had the opportunity to raise.
Hey, Julia, I'm not sure if all the participants can unmute themselves.
So they need to put things in
the chat. Yes, please.
In the chat. So. Okay. All right. Okay. Maybe I'll just kick off a little bit because I was very struck by what Albert said about how progress is really affected by by the election cycles. And that seems to me something that really has to change. So I don't know if any of the speakers want to talk a little bit about that, about how we can kind of break open that, so that we're not in, and having been a politician, I understand why politicians do that. I'm not saying I agree with it, but you know, everybody wants to appear to have had the idea or the scheme, or, you know, have their name to something, but it's certainly it's not just in the area of youth policy that this is a problem. It's in all kinds of areas where we'll just get going with a fantastic scheme and there'll be a budget line against it and all the rest of it. And then suddenly we're in a situation where there's an election, and it might even be an early election, and everything changes. And that is so difficult for people working in some of the services with the most vulnerable. So I don't know if anybody has any suggestions they'd like to make in terms of that.
If I could come in.
Yeah.
Thank you, indeed. So I think, I agree with you, Julie, that it was a very, very good presentation. The main problem with our democracies is that, you know, once we go to ballot boxes, people think that is the democracy that is finished, and you would wait for 4 or 5 years for next time to come to who you, that applies to USA as it applies to India, or applies to you know, Nigeria, Kenya, anywhere. So we need mechanisms for democracy to function a different way, not necessarily the ballot boxes once in a few years at the federal level. So that's why it's important, the meeting that we have in empowering towns and small cities. We create embryos of democracies flourishing in small contexts that people can empower, irrespective of what happens at the central level. So that way the decentralization process has to be a people-driven one, irrespective of what the policymakers or the international, you know, conglomerates do. That's why I think we need the municipalities and small towns and cities have to work with people to democratize and empower people at the local level, so that their disempowerment at the central level does not necessarily affect their day-to-day life. It's a challenge, but it can be done. Like Costa Rica, I think it's an interesting example that way. And to some extent, Norway also, they're trying to see to what extent decentralization indeed is taking place at the grassroots levels, you know. So this is a challenge that we need to have. And, you know, democracy is not just about ballot boxes and changing money and votes, you know. That's what I think.
Thank you, Krishna. It's really great that you came in there. In fact, we one of the things that Mike Pryor and I are both engaged in with Culture Declares Emergency is trying to demand citizens' assemblies around the climate and ecological emergency bill, which is hopefully going to be put to the UK Parliament in its new session. And citizens' assemblies have been very successful in places like Ireland, where very difficult discussions and subjects needed to be discussed, and people felt much more informed and much more confident about making decisions. I came across an interesting idea somewhere about parliaments established around other geographical and topographical features. So river parliaments, for example, which I always thought would be an absolutely amazing idea. You know, if you looked at the different communities that live along a river, like if you followed the Thames from its beginning to its estuary, going through the City of London, but also affecting lots of really small communities all along the way. So I think we could come up with some really interesting, much more relevant ways of having democratic assemblies. I just saw Albert there made a comment. Would you like to comment on the discussion, Albert, at this point?
Julie, may I please place myself on the queue?
Yes, Jose, yeah, go ahead. Yeah, now, yeah.
Okay. No, sorry. I'll let Jose talk, but I was just saying that indeed it's a very, very important function to be able to have citizen engagement, and particularly bottom up, Because in Kenya, I know we are currently having young people who are beginning to see the logic and the sense of how political decisions affect economic decisions, social decisions, and global decisions. So young people are beginning to get onto the table to be able to talk and discuss, but we still have a dispensation whereby politicians wield so much power. And immediately they come onto the ground, then the people who vote are mostly the ones who are at the bottom of the pyramid. The middle class keeps off the elections. So the elections are normally tilted in favor of the politicians because those who vote literally do not have a say. For them is to be given whatever handouts they can be given, and those are the masses who vote. But again, like I'm saying, indeed, through this kind of forums, there is a lot of hope that a lot can actually change. Thank you. Thank you, Julie.
Yeah, thank you. And Jose, you were going to make some points, which I think would be useful.
Actually, thank you so much to have the opportunity to say what I'm going to try to say very quickly. So I encourage everybody, after I finish saying what I'm saying, to give me either a thumbs up or a thumbs down, either visually or with some of the iconographic tools. So why am I doing this? It's because it's such a good group of people right now, and we're interacting from different parts of the world. And I want to mention to you that at least in the Commonwealth of Nations, where English law is used, the use of precedents, it's very important. The development of precedents, the implementation of precedents, and then the replication of them. So I want to ask your opinion about an idea that it's very practical to see if I'm doing something wrong. Maybe Julie specifically can tell me, since she's a very experienced politician, and I know there's other experienced politicians. Okay, so here we go. York University, first of all, I need to ask, can you hear me okay? Yes or no? Perfect, thank you. So York University, in June of this year, in the Senate of the university, unanimously approved an academic plan that will be based on the Sustainable Development Goals for 2020 to 2025. Now, that is the rule of York University. So what I'm proposing is in September, I will bring a motion to the Senate of the university to ensure that a new fund is created to support the implementation of the UN SDGs at the university. And if that motion carries, it will encourage the Board of Governors. No, it won't encourage them. It will direct the Board of Governors to finance a new fund that could be, for example, $17 million, $1 million per each UN SDG per year for the next 5 years. And that's just a starter of the money conversation, because the university should fundraise in 5 years to create a mega pot of UN SDG. So, yes or no, does that make sense or not? Would this create a useful precedent for people in the Commonwealth, in other cities? York University is a small city. So, thumbs up, thumbs down. Am I wrong? Am I right? Did I explain it clear? I see 2 thumbs up. Chison, thumbs up or down? I don't see Alex. Alex, I see you now. Thumbs up or down? Elise? Yusuf, thank you. Albert, too, thank you. Reza? Okay, so Julie, I propose to work offline with you because we are in September and the first meeting of Senate will be soon. Okay. And I can say to my august senator colleagues that I met with a very, very smart politician from the UK, which I hope you will consider for Prime Minister, Julie, because clearly there's a need for new politicians. So I'm gonna leave it at that. I just wanted to show you the interactivity that we are now. Talking about the past, it's very useful, but we need to talk about the present, how we set precedents. And any city that adopts the UN SDGs, every region or nation should now wrestle with the fact that they need to translate their intellectual, political commitment into budgetary items that will change the local situation to create local employment using the technologies that will protect Earth. And I end by reminding everybody that UN SDG #1, it's about ending poverty. So this is something for the nations that are wealthy. We need to remember the nations that are not wealthy and continue to work with each other. Long enough. Thank you, Julie.
Yeah, that was a fantastic intervention. I love that you began your presentation by talking about how our meeting last year gave you a relationship with those incredible young people who are doing art projects. And like, here we are again having a global meeting, and you're making connections. And I'm sure that other people who've been in this meeting today will continue these fantastic relationships. You mentioned something very, very important though, and that is about the governing bodies, because all organizations, yes, they have out-facing public personas, people like CEOs, you know, the face of the organization, but they often have, well, most organizations have governance, have trustees or boards or directors. And actually we have to make a massive impact on those people, because they're not necessarily the public face, but they are incredibly powerful. And at university level, some of these people don't want to move. They're very comfortable. They've been very set for a long, long time in their old ways. And I just tell a brief story, if I may, which is some young students at Manchester University who were studying undergrads, studying economics, asked the university if they could have a course on post-crash economics, because the economic crash had happened and the only economics that they were learning were the economics that had failed the world. And they asked the university, we want to understand about post-crash economics. And they had a teacher, a professor who was brilliant, who was willing to do this. And the university put a stop to it. The university wasn't ready, right, to engage with these students or with this teacher. So the teacher said, okay, I will make this a community class online, free to anybody who wants to participate. And he did this. At the end of the year, he lost his job, and he knew he was going to lose his job because he had stepped out of line, and because the old guard who were running that university didn't want to engage with these new ideas. But those students got themselves in The Guardian, the national newspaper in the UK, because they continued their actions and they set up the Post-Crash Economics Society, which is now an international movement. So it's a really interesting story. And of course, this incredible economics professor who, you know, lost his job there, ended up running a fantastic course somewhere else, because he was already steps ahead of the things that the old guard kind of wanted to, you know, they were sort of resisting. So I think that what you're talking about is important, but let's not underestimate the resistance to change, because that you know, there is this massive resistance to change, I think, by people who love being comfortable in their positions of power. And actually that's so important that this session has been about young people and about women and about refugees. It has been about the people who don't have power, who are not given those spaces. And, you know, the fact that the Town Summit has engaged with that today, I think is really, really important. I don't know if anybody else wants to make a comment. I know we have to close fairly
Need to
soon.
wrap up now, yes.
Sorry,
Yeah,
okay. I do see that Muhammad Kabir Issa and as well as Maureen McLeod have their hand raised.
Yeah, I haven't, sorry, I have to apologize. I'm doing this on a little phone and I don't have hand raised facility, so I don't see it. So Alex, if you could just give those two speakers some time, yeah, that'd be great. Sure. Thank you. I don't mind who first, yeah.
Go ahead, Muhammad.
Okay, thank you very much. I just want to lend a voice with respect to the issues of Albert's presentation on Kenyan politician. In Nigeria, for example, a turning point is that governance is becoming accountable with the help of donor agencies and donor partners like the World Bank. They're getting regional government at the state level to engage communities in what they call town hall meetings. Even though by my criteria, the town hall meetings are limited in terms of the participation of the participants that are chosen by the regional government, but it's a model that could be replicated at the municipal level or the local government level because it's absent completely. And you have this challenge of politicians when it comes to election, they forget their promises and they face election. For example, we just voted a government in 2019, and already politicians are already looking towards 2023 when the next election is coming on. And people are already thinking and planning and working. Attention is not focused towards policy and what can be achieved at the level of policy and implementation. Rather, people are, and politicians are already scheming and working and aligning, alliance cordial, you know, which group will inch which group out. So there's a divergence from what is real to what is abstract, because 2023 is abstract. And so it's worse at the local level because there's virtually no governance accountability, no transparency. It's less complicated at the central. There's some degree of, if you like, checks at the national level, but at the local level it's completely absent. And so I quite agree with that discussion that we focus attention because that's where the population are. And that's where people just go and vote. It's a ritual. People just vote and walk away and that's all and that's it. Till the next circle or ritual of election, people come wait for handouts, vote, and then go. No accountability and no structure. So I quite agree and concur with that position that there is need for some level of intervention. And one of the things to be done is to have governance make governance accountable at the local level, get politicians to be accountable. And it can only work with some degree of advocacy and enlightenment, some reorientation engineering at the community level. Let me allow the other speaker to lend their voice.
Thank you.
Now, sorry, just a sec, please. Just a sec. In the Northeast Nigeria, we're challenged with, you know, a large chunk of population, about 2 million of internally displaced persons. I would want the refugee rights group and the City of Sanctuary to lend some form of, you know, idea on how we could support this. And 70% of the population of internally displaced persons are women and children. So while they were making their presentation, I was looking at Northeast Nigeria and very recently Northwest of internally displaced persons. A large chunk of their population are women and children, and how we can partner and see what intervention can come in towards that direction. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I think we have one more speaker. Sorry, I don't have the names in front of me.
Marianne, please feel free to share your comment.
I'm so sorry. I hit that accidentally when I was writing in the chat. So I don't actually have anything salient to add.
Okay. We did see your comments.
Okay. Well, I think we're going to wrap up because we've gone a little bit over time. I've made lots and lots of notes. I can't tell you how amazed, how good I feel about this today, that we've managed to bring together some incredible partners with some really fantastic, inspiring projects that could be replicated in different places. So I'd love to see, you know, I mean, a connection between cities of sanctuary and Nigeria, Kenya, you know, other countries would be really fantastic and great. It would be wonderful to see international child press being taken up, you know, in towns and cities and other places around the world. And in fact, I know that Elise has been growing this model and working in lots and lots of different countries, but it has a lot to offer. I think maybe the most—
I just have a last comment.
Yeah, the final thing is just how we all have to be very courageous. We have to be very brave, and we have to be very courageous. And that's something that Nina and Elise were saying when they made their presentation. You know, the children and the young people need to be brave and ask the questions, and the adults need to be brave, need to listen and to be brave in their actions. And thanks, everybody. I'm sure I'll see some of you tomorrow. And if not tomorrow, then hopefully in some future joint initiatives where we'll be working. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Julie. Just one small point before you leave. Just remember that the resolution document is being distributed. You need to, all the participants here in this group need to look at the resolution and eventually make their comments, and which will be discussed tomorrow in the afternoon. In the meantime, it's important that the resolution document is looked into. Alex has sent it to all the participants, I think. And so please take time to read, because this outcome document will indeed decide the future course, not only of the future summits, also of our participation here. How do we take things from here? So please look at the resolution, draft resolution that we have distributed, and make your comments and enrich them so that it becomes all a document that all of us can own, actually. So Alex, any other comment?
No, thank you, Krishnan. As Krishnan said, that document is so important for us. I also previously shared the Town Leaders Global Network, which will be another major output for Habitat in Towns. As I said in my previous email to everyone, we really want to include your ideas and your thoughts to create something that's really solid globally. Thank you.
Okay. Okay.
So that's wrap up of our session. Sorry, Krishnan, I think you were saying something, but you were muted. So we are continuing tomorrow with Building Back Better and Differently,
Okay.
Our session 4, and then resolution drafting in the afternoon. I invite you all to.
It's just that the leaders of this panel, so Julie, if she would be kind enough to make a small presentation, from this meeting for tomorrow to be presented. It's important that we have a summary from the meeting that we had just now.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Thank you, everybody. Thank you so much for the participation. Yeah, and thanks, Alex, for
good night.
all your
Good night. Good night.
Okay. Yeah.
All right. Good night, everybody. Thank you.
Good
Thank
night,
you so
Professor. Good night.
Thank you.
Albert.
Good night.
Okay. Bye.
Good night. Good night. Good night, Mike.
Elise, I can still see you there.
Yeah. Hello.
Great.
Thank you so much for. I was just writing to you.
You WhatsApp me instead, because we're going to close this now.
Yes,
okay?
exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. If we work on the resolution tomorrow. Very important what we've been doing.
Brilliant. I'm so glad you're part of this. Wonderful. Okay, thank you.
Yusuf, have I seen you somewhere? All right. Okay. Bye-bye, Julie. We see you again tomorrow.
Yeah. Okay. Good night.
Thank you so much for the session. That was amazing.
Yeah, it was really good. Really good.
All right. Good night.
Bye.
this global summit. Have a great day.
Hi, Martin. Thank you for your facilitation. I was not able to participate as I was in the other session. I'm sure you had a lot of great discussion, though. We would love to get just a kind of group photo with everybody. If you are able to turn on your cameras, we can grab a big photo of everyone. I see cameras coming on. While people turn their cameras on, I'll just take the time to share. I see so many cameras right now. This is great. I'll just take the time to share a few final remarks that are important for us at Habitat in Towns, Collingwood, and Urban Economy Forum, you and Habitat. We do have our resolution that I have shared with you many times. I'm going to take this opportunity again to share this with you. We really want your feedback. Sorry, I sent that to specifically. There we go. We really want your feedback on this document. The instructions are in the document itself to email my colleague, Ilda. As well, I shared this with you previously, but we also are launching or establishing the Town Leaders Global Network. I have also shared this with you, but we are really looking for you to contribute your footprint on this document. So we can ensure that it's the best it can be, has many minds. As I'm sure we all aware, the smartest person in the room is the room itself. So please contribute. And then final remarks is we are having we are continuing tomorrow. We have session 4, Building Back Better and Differently with our facilitators. And we will do our final resolution drafting in the afternoon. Martin, we have already spoken about this, but if you could just provide your kind of high-level comments that came out of your session and prepare a brief presentation as well in the afternoon. That is everything from me. I don't think anyone else has any comments. Okay, great. So thank you so much, everybody. And I hope to see you all tomorrow. Have a good day, or have a good evening, morning, night, wherever you are.
Thank you all.